Study Session 2, Second World War and its influence on the structure of the international system. Introduction. In this study session, our focus shall be on the Second World War and how it affected the structure of the community of states. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to point out what caused the Second World War and the nations involved. Explain how it was fought and ended, and analyze how it divided the nations of the world. Overview of the structure of the international system before the Second World War. The Second World War was fought from 1939 to 1945 on a global level. Here, structure means the mode of arrangement of the component parts of units of a system. The international system from the earlier discussion is a collection of independent states that exist and interact with some regularity and understanding. If we can start this brief overview from 1914, when the First World War began, we will then say that at this period, no one country or bloc of nations had the power to control others. There were empires and kingdoms, like the German Empire, created by Otto von Bismarck, who became Chancellor in 1862, and noted for his iron and blood policy. The United Kingdom, formed by the British Empire in 1801. Power was diffused among states at this period, and they formed alliances now and then to balance their power. The First World War began in 1914 after Archduke Francis Ferdinand of Austria was assassinated by a Serbian liberation fighter named Gavrilo Principe in Yugoslavia. The assassination led to the strengthening of two alliances. One, the Triple Entente, including Yugoslavia, USSR, France, Italy, and the UK, and the Central Powers, including Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey. The two alliances fought on the war without sign of victor or vanquished till the USA joined the Triple Entente, and the tide turned against the Central Powers, who signed for peace. The war ended in 1918 with over 39 million lives lost, according to the International Encyclopedia of the Social Sciences, volume 15 to 17. The Treaty of Versailles, a town in France, was signed to document the end of the war in January 1919. This treaty was drawn up by the victorious nations to punish Germany as shown in its treaty terms, which can be read from M. Wierst, The Great Documents of Western Civilization, 1965. Tip: the First World War ended with little or no effect on the structure of the international system, because by then the Russian Revolution was 1 year old and socialism or communism was yet to come in 1922. Only the German Empire was dismantled and the Central Powers weakened. Also, no nation emerged with any new weapon system. The victors did not have problems or disagreements on what to do to the vanquished nations. Effects of the Second World War on the structure of the international system. From 1918 to 1938, a lot of changes occurred in the international system. The League of Nations came into being in 1919, and in 1922, communism began in the USSR. In the same year, Benito Mussolini, founder of fascism, became Premier of Italy. In 1931, Britain established the Commonwealth, and in 1933, racist Adolf Hitler became the leader of Germany. The emergence of Adolf Hitler as the leader sowed the seeds of the Second World War. He began invading smaller nations. For example, in 1936, Germany invaded Rhineland, otherwise known as Belgium, and in 1938, Hitler annexed Austria and part of Czechoslovakia in search for more living space, or Lebensraum for Germans. This search was fueled by his racist philosophy that the Aryan race, especially the Germans, constituted the superior race in the world and must rule the world. Hint: the emergence of Adolf Hitler as a leader sowed the seeds of the Second World War. It was in 1939 that the immediate cause of the Second World War occurred, and that was the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany under Hitler. Poland had mutual defense agreement with France and Britain. Thus, once she invaded Germany, France and Britain had to fulfill their treaty obligations by declaring war on Germany on the 3rd of September 1939. In 1940, Japan, Italy, and Germany formed a military alliance to persecute the war against Britain, France, and their allies. The USA joined the Allied powers in the war against Germany and her Nazi powers in 1941. Germany surrendered in 1944, but Japan fought on alone since Italy withdrew in 1943. In July 1945, the USA tested her first atomic bomb, whose research began under the leadership of physicist Albert Einstein in 1941. Two of the bombs were dropped on Japan's two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 6th and 9th August respectively, leading to the surrender of Japan. The war ended with over 51 million lives lost. What effect did the war have on the structure of the international system? Before answering this question, it is important for you to know that during the war, Russia under Lenin spread socialism to the Eastern European countries she liberated from the Nazi forces, Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Bulgaria. Also, during the war, the Western capitalist nations such as Britain, France, and the USA fought separately from the Eastern socialist nations such as USSR, Bulgaria, and China. Now, to answer the question, the Second World War ended up dividing the international system into two ideological and political power blocks. On one side were the Western capitalist bloc nations, such as Britain and France, and their colonies in Africa, South Africa, and America. On the other side were USSR and her liberated Eastern Socialist Bloc nations. The Western Bloc was led by the USA, while the Eastern Bloc was led by the USSR. This situation is known as bipolarity. Hint: relations between the West and East later degenerated into a Cold War and nuclear arms race between USA and USSR, and from 1949 to 1964, when China became a nuclear power, politics in the international system was dominated by the two superpowers, USA and USSR. The division was as a result of many factors. 1. The emergence of two opposing ideologies, capitalism, an ideology professing individual or private ownership of wealth and means of production, and socialism, an ideology advocating collective or state ownership of wealth and means of production and the running of government by workers. 2. The misunderstanding, mutual fear, and suspicion that arose between USA and USSR after the war over crucial matters such as what to do with the European states liberated by USSR. USSR wanted to keep these states under communist rule, but the USA did not approve of this. The monopoly of the atomic bomb by the USA, the future of Germany, and the division of Europe into areas of influence. There were certain events that confirmed the bipolarity. These include 1. The formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, led by the USA in 1949 for the defense of the Western Bloc. 2. The formation of an opposing Warsaw Treaty Organization in 1955, led by the USSR for the defense of the Eastern Bloc. 3. The establishment of the Marshall Plan in 1947 by the USA for the economic recovery of Western European nations. 4. The subsequent establishment of two bodies, COMCON and COMINFORM, by the USSR to pursue the economic recovery and unity of the Eastern Bloc. The USA and USSR thus began operations to keep their allies within their respective blocs through economic and military aid, and at times by political manipulation. The above situation between the East and the West later degenerated into a Cold War and nuclear arms race between the USA and the USSR. And from 1949 to 1964, when China became a nuclear power, politics in the international system was dominated by the two superpowers, USA and USSR. In the next study session, we shall tell you more of this Cold War. Reading activity. Read about the Second World War and highlight the role of the US and USSR in it. Post your findings on Study Session 2 forum page on course website. Study Session Summary. In this study session, we discussed extensively on Second World War and other issues related to it. At the end of the war, the international system was divided into two ideological power blocs: Western Capitalist Bloc, led by the USA, and Eastern Socialist Bloc, led by the USSR. The division of the world into these two blocs is a product of two major factors: the existence of two opposing ideologies, capitalism and socialism, and the misunderstanding that arose between the USA and the USSR after the war. End of Study Session 2. Thanks for listening.